Every time Josh Hokit grabs a microphone, somebody in a UFC office should be reaching for a phone. Michelle Obama is a man. Am I right, America? He said that into a live broadcast on the South Lawn of the White House, with the President of the United States sitting in the front row. Josh Hokit has said things that would end most athletic careers in an afternoon. And that creates a weird problem. The UFC's own CEO publicly condemned him. So how did a guy the sport keeps apologizing for become the one heavyweight nobody can control? To understand him, you have to go back to a town most people have never heard of. Josh Hokit was born in Bakersfield in November of 1997 and raised in Wasco, a small farming town in California's San Joaquin Valley. This is not the California anybody puts on a postcard. It's almond orchards, packing sheds, and heat that sits on you all summer. His father, Seth, was obsessed with wrestling, and that obsession got handed straight down. Josh started wrestling at 4 years old. By 6, he was a national champion. Most kids that age are learning to tie their shoes. He was already winning tournaments in front of screaming parents in high school gyms. Football came a few years later, and from that point forward, football in the fall. No off-season, no downtime, no version of Josh Hokit that wasn't training for something. Then he did something that tells you almost everything about him. As a sophomore, he transferred out of Wasco Union High School and went to Clovis High, an hour and a half up the valley, purely to get into a better wrestling room. 15 years old and already relocating his life around a sport. It worked. By his senior year, he was ranked as high as 3rd in the entire country in wrestling. He won a California state title at 182 pounds, and he was doing that while playing linebacker and running back at the same time, putting up 125 tackles on defense and 820 rushing yards with 8 touchdowns on offense. The Fresno Bee named him Athlete of the Year, 2 sports, both at an elite level in the same 12 months. The offers came in. Drexel University in Philadelphia gave him a full wrestling scholarship, free education, high-level program, exactly what a wrestling family dreams about. He turned it down when he found out Drexel didn't have a football team. Instead, he walked on at Fresno State with 0 guaranteed money. He gave up a scholarship to pay his own way for the right to do both. And around this same period, then Michigan head coach Jim Harbaugh ran a camp in Fresno and asked the kid what he planned to major in. Hokit told him he was going to be the MMA heavyweight champion of the world. His high school coach tried to train that answer out of him before the next recruiting visit. It didn't take. He gave the same answer to Utah State: heavyweight champion or bust. That was the line, and he never stopped saying it. At Fresno State, he lived 2 athletic lives at once. He played in more than 50 football games across 4 seasons and finished with over 1,200 rushing yards and 17 touchdowns. On the mat, he became the program's first All-American in years, and then did it a second time. Understand how strange that is. Division I wrestlers at that level typically train year-round from childhood and treat the sport as the only thing in their life. Hokit was cramming an entire wrestling season into the 2 months he had left after football ended, and he still landed on the All-American podium twice. Then 2020 came, and the sport he'd sacrificed the scholarship for chewed him up. He went undrafted. He signed with the San Francisco 49ers as an undrafted free agent and made the practice squad as a fullback. Practice squad is not the NFL, not really. It's being good enough to be useful and never good enough to be safe. Signed, waived, re-signed, waived again. A revolving door with your name taped to the locker in pencil. He hung on through August of 2022 when the Arizona Cardinals cut him for the last time. 24 years old, 2 Division I sports, an All-American resume, an NFL contract, and nothing left to show for it. That's the part people skip when they talk about him now. Before the White House, before the ranked wins, before the microphone, there was a stretch where the thing he'd built his entire identity around simply told him no. He's referenced it since, and he doesn't soften it. He talks about the people criticizing him and points out they weren't around when he was down, when he was broken. So he went back to the only thing he'd ever said out loud that he actually wanted. In March of 2023, at 25 years old, Josh Hokit signed with Bellator to start a professional MMA career he had told a college football coach about years earlier. He made his debut that October at Bellator 300 against Spencer Smith, a rear naked choke in 42 seconds in March. Another first round knockout in May by second round knockout, contract in hand. And on that broadcast, he made another prediction. The UFC debut came in November of 2025 against Max Gimenez. It lasted 56 seconds. 2 months later, at UFC 324, he knocked out Denzel Freeman in the first round. 2 fights, 2 first-round finishes, and something else. The wrestling base does exactly what it looks like it should. He closes distance, gets people to the mat, and hits them until the referee moves. When it stays standing, the right hand is real. He's not the biggest heavyweight in the room. His hands are fast for the division, and he doesn't respect anybody's reputation. He trains out of Jackson Wink MMA in Albuquerque now, which is where a lot of raw physical talent goes to get organized. And the profile is unusual even for a heavyweight prospect. He's 6'1" in a division full of 6'5" monsters, and he uses that as an advantage, getting underneath people and turning a striking match into a wrestling match nobody signed up for. But the fighting was never what made him famous. That was the other thing, because somewhere between the practice squad and the octagon, Josh Hokit figured out that being the most disliked man in the building pays better than being the most respected. He built a heel act and then kept turning it up. He taunted Alex Pereira relentlessly. He went after Ilia Topuria at a press conference and had to be escorted off the stage by security. At UFC 2027 Media Day, he showed up waving a toy lightsaber, walked into a hotel lobby, and started threatening Yuri Prochazka, a former light heavyweight champion who wasn't fighting him, wasn't in his weight class, and had nothing to do with him. Prochazka stayed seated and told him to stay where he was. Hokit, still in character, promised to cut him up with the lightsaber and stitch his head onto Alex Pereira's body. Then he got led away. At the Freedom 250 weigh-ins, he pretended to vomit on stage, dribbling colored liquid out of his mouth, and claimed he'd been drinking the night before. Some of that is standard fight week theater. A lot of it isn't. He has repeatedly drawn condemnation for public statements described as racist, transphobic, and anti-immigrant. And here's the part that should have stopped him. It didn't. At UFC 327 in April of 2026, 8 months after his UFC debut, they put him in with Curtis Blaydes, the number 5 ranked heavyweight in the world, and a fixture near the top of the division for the better part of a decade. Blaydes was bigger. Blaydes was more experienced. On paper, this was the fight where the loud guy gets found out. What happened instead was 15 minutes of controlled violence that people are still talking about. The two of them combined for 354 significant strikes, a new 3-round heavyweight record, and one of the highest totals in any 3-round fight in company history. Blaydes actually landed more of them, 177 to 174. Both men got rocked. Neither one broke. Hokit won a unanimous decision, 29 to 28 across all 3 cards, and walked out undefeated with the biggest scalp of his career. That's the mechanism, and it's worth saying plainly. The antics only work if you win. Say all of it. Do all of it. That's the combination the sport has never really had an answer for. 2 months later came the night that made him a household name for reasons that had nothing to do with fighting. On June 14, 2026, the UFC staged Freedom 250 on the South Lawn of the White House, the first professional sporting event ever held at the presidential residence. Hokit fought Derek Lewis, one of the most dangerous punchers in the division's history. He took Lewis down early, cut him open, nearly finished an armbar before the bell saved it, then walked him down on the feet in the second round and finished him with ground strikes. 10-0, the biggest win of his career on the biggest platform the sport has ever had. Then he took the microphone from Joe Rogan. He thanked the president. He walked over and handed Trump a chain. He thanked Jesus Christ. He called out Alex Pereira, who was fighting later that same night. And then he closed with the line about Michelle Obama. The reaction on the South Lawn was mostly shocked silence. At the watch party on the Ellipse, where tens of thousands of people were gathered, it split. Some cheers, some boos, a lot of people just looking at each other. Rogan didn't address it. He ended the interview and moved on. Dana White did address it. In a text message to Time magazine, the UFC CEO said he understood the Obamas are public figures, but that he's completely against saying nasty and false things about people's families. He said everyone knows where he stands on free speech and that he hates that kind of nonsense. That is the head of the company, a man famous for defending his fighters through almost anything, publicly condemning his own rising star. And nothing happened. He framed the whole thing as a demonstration of American free speech. He pointed out that if he'd said it in the NFL, he wouldn't have a job anymore. Then he added that Dana White and Hunter Campbell would have messaged him directly if they really cared. Them now weren't there when he was broken. Whatever you think of the man, he genuinely does not appear to be performing that part. Instead of a suspension, he got leverage. He's talked openly about fighting twice more before the end of 2026 and finishing the year with $3 to $4 million. He said there's a great chance he fights for the title inside the timeline he announced on Contender series. He's ranked number 5 at heavyweight, and he's the only fighter in that top 5 who has never lost. He's also made it clear he isn't going anywhere else to chase gold. The only way to be the baddest man on the planet is to hold the heavyweight title. The division above him is a mess. Tom Aspinall is the champion and has been sidelined. Cyril Gane holds the interim belt, and Hokit is right there underneath, undefeated, extremely active, and generating more headlines in a slow week than most contenders manage in a year. That's why nobody can control him. Not because he's untouchable, but because every single thing that should cost him something has instead made him more valuable. Say the unsayable, get condemned by your own boss, and get offered a bigger fight. He told a college football coach at 17 that he'd be heavyweight champion. He got cut by the NFL 3 times, and now, 3 years into a fighting career, he's 5 wins away from being unavoidable. And another fighter who turned rejection into fuel and then dared the sport to do something about it is Colby Covington. Except his version of the experiment eventually stopped working. To see where the difference actually is, check out this video next. Thanks for watching.